If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like, as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. Now, that said, due to recent leaks from the Louisville Metro Police Department, we now have more information regarding the lies that the cops told in the affidavit for their no-knock warrant. Long before the thugs in the LMPD launched their murderous attack against two black law-abiding citizens, they had already told one another that there were no suspicious packages being sent to Breonna Taylor's address. It all began with the lies that the Louisville police told in order to fabricate a premise for getting a no-knock warrant for Breonna Taylor's home, and the person who was primarily responsible for writing up the fraudulent warrant affidavit is LMPD Detective Joshua Janes. He was the one who made the false claim that there was some fictitious postal inspector who had told them that Jamarcus Glover had been using Breonna's address as a place to receive drug shipments. As I've reported to you previously, the local postal inspector, Tony Gooden, has already told the media that he never talked to the Louisville PD about Breonna Taylor. In fact, it turns out that nobody with the postal inspectors there will talk to the Louisville PD. We'll get to that in a moment. Though Mr. Gooden did say that there was an inquiry made by another police department, you'll recall. Now, according to the leaked report, Louisville police officers asked the neighboring Cheveley Police Department to check with the postal inspector about their fictitious claim that there were drug shipments going to Breonna Taylor's address. The Cheveley Police Department told the Louisville police that the postal inspector assured them that there were no suspicious packages being sent to Breonna Taylor's address. According to the leaked LMPD report, Jonathan Mattingly, one of the murderers, was the one who reached out to the Cheveley Police Department in mid-January, and it was Detective Janes who told him to do so. Mattingly was the one who made the request for the Cheveley police to ask the postal inspectors about any suspicious packages. So why didn't the Louisville police just contact the postal inspectors themselves? According to the report, one of the Cheveley police officers, Timothy Sallier, said that the Postal Service doesn't want to work with the Louisville police any longer after an incident involving the Louisville police and postal workers a few years ago, though the report doesn't explain what this incident was. Gee, so it's not just the public who the Louisville police have antagonized. These clowns are so criminal that they can't even ask the local post office for help because they've done something to the postal workers. So the Cheveley police told the murderer, Jonathan Mattingly, that they'd spoken to the postal inspector and had confirmed that there were no suspicious packages sent to Breonna Taylor's address. But the Louisville police were determined to get a different answer. So a week after Cheveley police officer Sallier told Mattingly that there were no packages sent to Taylor's address, two other Louisville police officers contacted Officer Sallier and asked the same questions over and over again. Sallier told them what he told Mattingly, that they had checked with the postal inspectors and there were no suspicious packages. Now, that should have been the end of that matter right there. But of course, as we all know, it wasn't. Now, Officer Sallier with the Cheveley Police Department, he was called in by the Louisville police and asked to do an interview following the murder. And Officer Sallier said that after the killing, he decided to read the warrant affidavit for himself. Apparently, he got curious with all the commotion about it, and this prompted Officer Sallier to talk to Jonathan Mattingly about it. According to Salyer's statement, Mattingly said that he told Louisville Police Detective Janes that there was no evidence that any packages had been sent to Breonna Taylor's address. And Sallier said that on April 10th, a month after the murder, he received a text message from Detective Janes, who was still asking him if there were any packages going to Breonna Taylor's home. At that late date, he was still asking about it. Now keep in mind, Jamarcus Glover had already been in custody. Breonna Taylor was dead, so what the hell were they expecting? Janes also asked Sawyer if Jamarcus Glover had been receiving any mail either. These guys are just grasping at straws at this point. Detective Sawyer said he was confused as to why Janes was still continuing to contact him, but we all know what the reason is. This is exactly what the corrupt prosecutor for Louisville, Tom Wine, did with Jamarcus Glover. He kept badgering Mr. Glover, trying to get him to falsely implicate Breonna Taylor, trying to suborn perjury. The reason that the Louisville police were persistently pestering the Cheveley police was because the Louisville PD realized they stepped on a non-negotiable landmine, and that this wasn't going to disappear from the headlines. The white media was helpless to ignore this one and make it go away, because the public had already gotten a bit in their teeth and weren't letting it go. The Louisville PD needed to get some people to give them some false testimony, give them some verbiage, anything that they can use to substantiate a phony story meant to get the heat off themselves. All this to justify a murder after the fact. This is how corrupt law enforcement is in the United States, because what the Louisville PD did, it was not at all unusual for police in the United States. And as we see with both Thomas Wine and Daniel Cameron, you got the prosecutors who are fully on board with this illegality as well. This is criminality from the cops all the way up to the Attorney General of the state. Now, their lies didn't need to hold up for long. It wasn't a matter of, oh, this story needs to hold up for 10 years. No, we just need to change the headlines. After all, it's an election year and you got the pandemic. So surely people are going to forget about this in due time. We just need to come up with some counter headlines that we can use until this all blows over. And that's why you had the white media trying to put forward an orgy of lies on behalf of the thugs in blue. And make it seem that, well, it was Kenneth Walker who kicked this off. It was all his fault. And, it was Breonna Taylor. She fell in with a bad crowd. And, this is actually her fault. And, if she had just straightened up earlier, they were doing everything that they could to blame the victims. Everything they could. Because that's what they wanted to be. They were going to try to program the public. We're going to flood you, carpet bomb you with all kinds of lying headlines that blame the victims. And we'll see if the public buys it. But the public didn't buy it. And that's why the white media eventually had to drop it. The longer that the white media flies in the face of public sentiment, the more they delegitimize themselves. And there's only so far they can afford to go with that. The propaganda arm of white supremacy can't afford to amputate itself. But the lies didn't need to stand long, just long enough for the corrupt attorney general to hold a sham grand jury and bury the matter there, or so they thought. Last week, Daniel Cameron made the asinine, ridiculous claim that his office hadn't reviewed the circumstances of how the police applied for that fraudulent warrant. He actually said that. He said, well, we haven't actually looked into the matter of the warrant that they got or what claims they made. We haven't really looked into that. Now, does anyone actually believe that? The entire reason for the no-knock warrant apparently was never looked into, and Daniel Cameron claims that they did a thorough investigation. Nah, what they did was a thorough cover-up. 4 months. And they never asked about the warrant. They never asked, hey, what evidence did you have to substantiate these claims in the warrant? We got to go back and check and recheck everything related to it. We got to go back and relitigate this entire investigation just to make sure you guys did your due diligence. You had Daniel Cameron spend 4.5 months and he never looked at the warrant. And keep in mind, it's not like there was a ton of paperwork related to the murder of Breonna Taylor. It's not like there was a whole bunch of just reams and reams of paper, entire warehouses of paper. No, it wasn't. This isn't some complex Wall Street financial scam here. And this isn't some sort of complex dealings that took years and years and years and years. So there's warehouses full of paperwork to go through. No, this was a very simple case of murder. The police lied to get a search warrant. They lied about federal employees. And this so that they could try to play Call of Duty in the streets. There's only a few pieces of paper related to this entire thing. The search warrant and the arrest warrant for Jamarcus Glover, and that's pretty much where it stops. if you're trying to investigate how the murder went down. But of course, that's the point. This was not meant to cover the circumstances of the crime. It was meant to cover it up. The entire basis for the search warrant, the murderers of Breonna Taylor used as a pretext to kill her, it was all based on a lie. It was not based on, as CNN tried to call it, a miscalculation. That's what the white media was saying back in July. CNN, as usual, lying. CNN investigates like hell. A key miscalculation by officers contributed to the tragic death of Breonna Taylor. Miscalculation? Did you see any miscalculation there? Louisville PD lied on their search warrant affidavit. And one of the officers said to the guy who wrote the fraudulent affidavit, told him, hey, the postal inspector said that there's no suspicious packages going to Breonna Taylor's place. So they just lied and said that it did anyway. That's not a miscalculation. That's a lie. But you don't see CNN saying anything about that, because when the white media gets caught lying, they don't come up with the confession. They just slither away. That warrant was the whole reason that the murder happened. But Daniel Cameron expects us to believe that he never asked a single question about it. Yeah, what that means is they were trying to figure out, how do we cover this thing up? Whoops, can't cover this up. Well, just pretend like it didn't happen. Don't worry, the white media won't call us on it. Yeah, but the black media will. Now, considering how Daniel Cameron lied about everything, why the hell is this bastard not in leg irons already? Why is he not already under investigation? And you know who else was apparently completely uninterested in the basis for this murder? Mary Shaw, the judge who signed off on this fraudulent search warrant. She's not very interested in it either. But of course, as has already been reported, Judge Mary Shaw has a long-standing record of being a rubber stamp who will gladly sign off on any of the Louisville police's warrants, no matter how unfounded, unsubstantiated, or illegal. Amazing how all the authorities in Jefferson County, and in the state of Kentucky for that matter, are completely and thoroughly disinterested in the fact that they all took part in a criminal matter that resulted in the murder of an innocent woman, stops looking like total incompetence and starts looking a lot more like a criminal conspiracy now, doesn't it? As far as covering for the killers of Breonna Taylor, it's all hands on deck. Everyone who has touched this case has been dirty as hell. The judge who signed off on the no-knock warrant, Judge Mary Shaw, on Friday, she was asked if she was going to hold Detective Janes in contempt because it's now been proven that he provided false information in the affidavit. There's not even a question about that. It's been proven. She was asked about it. And since she was the one who approved the search warrant, it should be a no-brainer that she says, yes, absolutely, I'm going to hold this guy in contempt. He lied. Instead, she said she was concerned, but she was going to defer to the FBI. Now, we already know that Bill Barr is in charge of the feeble-brained idiots, the FBI. And Bill Barr's made it clear with the Jacob Blake murder. He's made it clear he's signing off on all police murders. He's not investigating anything. So Mary Shaw, again, this is a case of, well, we don't have a grand jury that we can bury this with. So instead, we'll say that we're going to wait and see what the feds say. And if the feds say that they can't do anything, well, we'll say we can't do anything either. That's her courtroom, allegedly. What the hell is she doing waiting for the FBI on anything? What the hell's the FBI going to do that's going to stop her from being able to cite a lying thug with a badge for contempt of her court? But you see what's going on here. Everybody's playing hot potato. Everybody's passing the buck because this is about making sure that the killers don't get punished. This is a pivotal turning point. It's important that the murder and the cover-up of the murder be blatant and in your face. They want you to know, yes, we're covering it up. Yeah, you know it was a murder, and yeah, we're showing you guys that we're going to keep on breaking the law, and we're going to keep on killing black people, and we're going to keep doing this, and that we are doing this in direct defiance of the public will. Yeah, we know the public's looking to be putting people in prison, looking to be punishing people, and we're going to just stand on this. We're going to die on this hill. We're going to see what you guys do about it. So the judge who issued the warrant, she doesn't seem to be too bothered about the fact that the police committed perjury in her courtroom. She ain't bothered by that. That lets you know what they think about the law. The search warrant was based on a bald-faced lie, not a miscalculation. But the white media hid that, and the authorities ignored it. We know that the hobgoblin U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr is not going to do anything. But understand, Louisville is a Democrat city. And the governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, he's a Democrat too. You would think if anyone would be leading the charge to call for a special prosecutor to go after the Louisville death squad and the corrupt Attorney General Cameron, it ought to be Andy Beshear, but instead, he's laying low. He's not saying anything. He's hiding somewhere, probably in the same bunker with Joe Biden. Those two are huddled in the dark together, hoping that nobody comes looking for them. Everyone who touched this case, from the police to the prosecutors, were dirty, and they knew how dirty this entire case was, but they all lied. All of them lied. None of them broke ranks. What does that tell you? They all tried to blame the victim, and when that failed, Daniel Cameron tried to make the grand jury into a scapegoat, and now that that's failed, they're not sure what to do at this point. This is why we're not supporting either political party. Because both the Republicans and Democrats have made it clear that when it comes to the police killing black people, both parties will gladly cross the aisle. They'll put aside all partisanship and work together to make sure that the killers of black people are never punished. The white media tells us that this is the most politically polarized time in living memory, that the two parties haven't been this separated and hostile toward each other since the Civil War. They can't agree on anything. Republicans and Democrats can't see eye to eye on anything. If one of them says left, the other one says right as a reflex. They can't afford to cooperate on anything. They hate each other so much. And yet, in a Democrat-run city, in a Democrat-run state, the mayor and the Commonwealth attorney were able to easily and seamlessly work hand in hand with a Republican attorney general. And what was it that made it so easy for Democrats and Republicans in Kentucky to work together? What mutual principle was so unifying that it made politicians from both parties eager to get on the same page? What could bring these guys together in perfect harmony? To help the police get away with murdering a black person. See, it was the Democrat prosecutor Thomas Wine who began the cover-up. He was the one who refused to actually indict the police. He was the one who flat out refused. I'm not going to do it. He was the one who then tried to carry out a bogus prosecution of Kenneth Walker for the crime of defending himself. Thomas Wine was the one who conspired with Daniel Cameron to bury the case. Thomas Wine was the one who, weeks later, was still trying to manufacture a rhetorical rationale to cover for the murderers by incentivizing Jamarcus Glover to lie and say that Breonna Taylor was part of some drug operation, when Thomas Wine knew full well that she wasn't. These are the lengths that a Democrat has gone to justify the murder of a black person. Oh, you would think this is Rudy Giuliani doing it. You would think that this was Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III doing it. Oh, you would think that this was the most backward, hayseed, inbred, right-wing nut piece of garbage in a red state. Instead, it's the Democrats doing this. So it shows that where black people are concerned, there are no policy differences between the Democrats and the Republicans. They understand that. It's black people who have allowed Democrats' black bootlicks and puppets and shills and boule scumbags to try to tell us otherwise. It's black people who've been playing this game of, well, we'll let the Democrats pretend that they stand for our interests, and hopefully we can shame them into civilized behavior. It's black people playing a game and letting this go on so long. Neither the mayor of Louisville, nor the governor of Kentucky, nor the state Democratic Party has said boo, and national Democrats have not stepped in and said, wait a minute here. We got some problems here. Thomas Wine, you got to go. Nobody said, Andy Beshear, you need to be calling for a special prosecutor. After all, you got a chance to put a Republican, Daniel Cameron, on the hot seat. You got a chance to call for him to be investigated. The guy's already unpopular as hell. Hell, we can flip that attorney general seat to a Democrat just like that. All we got to do is put him under investigation, but they're not doing it. because this is not about Republican or Democrat. This is literally as simple as black and white. This is about maintaining and pushing back against black people, making some headway to punishing those who harm black people. This is about getting the pendulum to swing back in the other direction. That's what this is about. Trying to reverse the tide. Because they've taken too many L's and they understand that every defeat has fueled the next defeat. How did defund the police become a thing? It became a thing because the black grassroots was relentless. It became a thing because nobody gave a damn what the white media said. Nobody gave a damn what the Democrats said. People stuck to their guns, and now the bad guys are on the run. The thugs with badges are on the defensive, and the goal has been to keep the bastards there. Thomas Wine has committed malfeasance. He committed malicious prosecution with his attempted lynching of Kenneth Walker, and subornation of perjury when he tried to bribe Jamarcus Glover into lying about Breonna Taylor. And that's just a few of the crimes that Thomas Wine has committed. But you notice that you don't see any Republicans. Why? Shouldn't it be the Republicans saying, call in the Attorney General? This is a case for the U.S. Attorney's Office. Neither party is attempting to move in on this because the truth of the matter is they understand that this has all been political theater. They understand that they play off of each other while they work hand in hand against us. And by the way, in addition to not knowing or apparently not looking into the issue of the fraudulent arrest warrant affidavit, Daniel Cameron has not said a word about the ballistics report that shows that there is no conclusive evidence that Kenneth Walker actually shot Officer What's-His-Name. The ballistics report makes it clear we can't actually match the bullet to his gun. And Daniel Cameron hasn't said anything about that either. Well, I guess he hasn't looked into that, huh? Yeah, that lets you know no investigation was going on. He did, of course, look into it. He knows all about that fraudulent arrest warrant affidavit. That's why he didn't bring it up. He's not trying to make a case against the police. He's trying to figure out how to let them go. That's the reason why he didn't say anything to the grand jury. He didn't put indictment on the table. He didn't make that an option because he didn't want it to happen. We're not going to mention the fraudulent arrest warrant. We're not going to mention that they lied about federal employees to make their fraudulent case. We're not going to bring up the fact that these guys lied to a judge. And by the way, isn't that perjury as well? When you sign these affidavits, you're doing that under threat of perjury. So the cops perjured themselves in order to get this fraudulent warrant. And nobody's bothered by that. And Daniel Cameron's also not looking at the ballistics report because he actually did look at it. We know that he looked at it. And he looked at it and said, whoa, can't touch that. Okay, so we're not going to say anything about the fraudulent arrest warrant. We're not going to say anything about the ballistics report that proves that Kenneth Walker didn't shoot whomever. So that means that my entire rationale for not charging them, I can't even say it. So I'm just not going to bring it up. I'll continue to say, well, the cops believed that their lives were in danger. The ballistics report proves that they were not. The cops were the ones who fired first. So, the talking points that the white right and members of the white left and Daniel Cameron and Thomas Wine and the rest of the liars used to try to justify the murder of Breonna Taylor, they've all been proven false. The warrant that they wrote predicated on a total and complete lie. The police claimed that they weren't sure if they had a no-knock warrant. Turned out they had a no-knock warrant. And the police claimed that Kenneth Walker opened fire on them. Well, the ballistic report says otherwise. Their talking points getting knocked down one by one, and it's not taking tons of evidence to do it. It's just the most basic thing. They lied about the reports, lied about everything. Well, the only straw that they had, the only talking point was that, one of the neighbors said that they heard the police announce themselves. There's a neighbor, and he may be an African American, and that being the case, you can't say that. Why, this was a black person who said that the police announced themselves. Well, turns out, of course, that turned out to be just another lie as well. Now, we have our issues with Vice, but bear with me. They reported that, quote, according to the Public Integrity Unit's investigative file, LMPD investigators spoke to Aaron Sarpy on the phone twice in the ensuing months after the murder. On March 21st, a week after the shooting, Sergeant Jason Vance asked Sarpy directly if he heard anyone identify themselves as police. Sarpy responded no. Nobody identified themselves. Now, this was right after the murder. A week after the murder, Aaron Sarpy said no. Nobody identified themselves. Okay, well, the police got his statement and they walked away, right? Wrong. Another of the Public Integrity Unit's investigators, a Sergeant Amanda Seeley, she called Sarpy back 2 months later on March 15th. Now, clearly, this is a case of the police going back to a witness, working over the witnesses, badgering the witnesses until they get the answer they wanted. Now, doesn't this sound familiar? Exactly like Detective Janes when he was harassing and haranguing Officer Salyer from the Shively Police Department. These guys decide when they don't get the answer that they want the first time, especially when they got their butts in a crack, they start ringing your phone off the hook. Are you sure? Have you heard anything? Are you sure? Are you sure? Have you heard anything? Yeah, the police badgering someone until they get the answer they want. And even though there's been the leak of the Louisville PD's report, we know that the report is still not complete. Because in the case of Sarpy, when the cops called him back on May 15th, the cop who called him, she said that she and Sarpy had had a previous conversation, but there's no record of those two speaking at any point prior to that phone conversation. So what that means is the cops are burying the evidence. The cops are getting rid of incriminating phone calls. They're looking to go, we got to get rid of all this stuff. Anything that's got our names on it, we got to get rid of this stuff because it shows what we did. We lied. And I wonder what's in that recording that they don't want anyone to hear. Perhaps there was some sort of deal that was made. If not for Mr. Sarpy, then for someone that he knows. Perhaps the cops let him know, hey, we can help you out or help so-and-so close to you out with this little issue if you just play ball. We're making a deal here. Oh, but I didn't hear the cops announce themselves. They didn't announce themselves. I'm telling you that they didn't. Yeah, but what if you say that they did? Sounds a lot like what Thomas Wine tried with Jamarcus Glover now, doesn't it? Actually, it sounds more to me like what happened during the Michael Slager trial when Michael Slager murdered Walter Scott. Dorsey Montgomery, you remember him, that sweet in the shoes lead juror, the only black person on that jury. When they had their hung jury the first time, and Dorsey Montgomery, who the prosecutors made him the jury foreman, and then it turns out that this guy had a criminal record and the prosecutors went ahead and dropped the charges against him. Yeah, just in time for that trial. I'm sure the two events were completely and thoroughly unconnected. You see, that's what this smells like to me, because we see that this pattern plays itself out over and over again. The cops come up to some black person. The black person says, I can't do nothing for you. Then the cops make them a deal. Next thing you know, they're saying whatever the police want them to say. And the white media runs with that because that's what this is about. Manufacturing a narrative out of whole cloth that will be convenient and useful to the immediate needs of white supremacy at the moment. See, we don't know what happened because the cops apparently, they lost that little recording from the first time that this officer, Seeley, spoke with Mr. Sarpy. But we do know the second time that she spoke with him, all of a sudden he changed his story. You know what? On second thought, I think I did hear the cops say that this is the cops. May 15th, Sergeant Seeley called Aaron Sarpy, and during this conversation, which spans almost 7 minutes, Sarpy shifts his account and says he heard police say this is the cops. But of course, that wasn't all of it, because as Aaron Sarpy also said, it's been so long now, I recall some of it. Now, of course, what they understood was this was never actually going to go to trial. It didn't matter if Aaron Sarpy remembered anything. It didn't matter whether or not he contradicted himself. This was not going to go to trial. They were just trying to get some quotes and some talking points that they could use to give to the white media, which is exactly what they did. They were not looking at this and going, man, how is he going to hold up on the witness stand? What about cross-examination? You sure that this guy's story is airtight? Can he actually, does he have anything to substantiate what he says? Does he have any recordings? Was he recording the raid when it went down? Does he have anything? No, they weren't worried about that because they knew that this was never going to see the inside of a courtroom. It wasn't meant to. This was fodder for the white media to run with so that they could push a counter narrative in the white media. That's what this was about. They didn't give a damn whether or not Aaron Sarpy had anything to substantiate what he said. This was about badger. Just find out everybody who's there, badger them until one of them cracks, until one of them contradicts themselves, until one of them goes back on their story. Just keep harassing them. Hey, we got this immigrant over here. Hey, you know how flaky those guys are. So we'll go ahead and we'll put the arm on him and see if he cracks. Sure enough, he did. Okay, he gave us something we can work with here. Okay, it's only one of them, but at least it's one. At least we got somebody. Now we can muddy the waters. Sure, the other 99.9% of the people who were awake that night said that the cops never announced themselves, but we found one who did, and that'll be the one who the white media runs with it. Isn't that exactly what happened? The white media never said, wait a minute here. If the other 99% of the people who gave statements said the police did not identify themselves and only one person did, then that one person's probably wrong. That person's that statement probably isn't true. At the very least, that person better have more than their word because everybody else there says one thing. You got one guy who says the opposite. But when it comes to justifying the murders of black people, the white media's default position is we got to substantiate anything, no matter how ridiculous, no matter how unfounded, no matter how blatantly false. That's the narrative. The black person deserved to die. Everybody else who's there can say that the police didn't announce themselves, but if we find one person who says that they did, that's going to be the headline. And that's exactly what it was. That's the direction that the police and the prosecutors and the press wanted. They were all on the same page. The police's story was crumbling from the jump, and they knew it. The white media knew it. But they and the Commonwealth Attorney and Daniel Cameron, they all continue to lie even today. They knew that the postal inspector told the cops that there were no suspicious packages going to Breonna Taylor's address. The prosecutors, the county and state, they knew that the ballistics report showed that the bullet that hit one of the assailants could not have been matched to Kenneth Walker's gun. But they lied anyway, all to try to change the headline. Because they were terrified of what would happen if they actually had to bring this to trial. This is about stopping the punish the police movement in its tracks. And part of that is we're going to lie and lie boldly. Yeah, you guys will know what really happened, but the thing about it is you won't be able to bring enough pressure to force us to actually have to be held to account, except that's exactly what's happening. Daniel Cameron perpetuated the lies when he claimed that the reason he couldn't charge the murderers was because Kenneth Walker had fired first. Kenneth Walker only fired one shot. One. The bullet that they claimed, which we now know they claimed falsely, hit one of the intruders. But now, if it turns out that this was the cops who shot one another, then that means Walker was reacting to the cops opening fire on each other. And there's no way whatsoever to manufacture a story that places the blame on Mr. Walker then. So the white media's like, well, we got to stop talking about that. And Daniel Cameron's like, I'm not saying anything about the ballistics report. I don't know anything about it. And then there's the video of two of the murderers, Hankinson and Cosgrove, rummaging around Breonna Taylor's apartment. After they had murdered her, they decided, well, now we're going to go ahead and look around, see if we can find anything that we can use. We need a headline that says, we stepped in it big this time. We need to have a headline that says that there was contraband. We better find something illegal. Otherwise, we're in deep crap. Well, they were in deep crap because they didn't find anything. And they didn't have enough time to plant anything. See, that's the problem with when you decide that you're going to bring all the little thugs from the local kill squad with you. Well, everyone's watching you. The Louisville police policy, however, was violated when Hankinson and Cosgrove called themselves rummaging through Breonna Taylor's apartment. When they called themselves walking around, when they did not immediately leave, they violated not just Louisville police policy, which requires that all police who kill citizens be removed from the scene under police escort. They also violated the law because they contaminated a crime scene, and they did so knowingly. It's not like they were sitting there going, oh, what do we should do? They were looking and going, don't worry, the white media is not going to say anything. This will all go away. Just everybody just stay cool, and this will blow over, and it'll be forgotten. There'll be some other black person who we kill next week, and that'll be the headline. We just gotta stick together through this. Now, keep in mind, the police chief for the Louisville PD, he had this information. He had the information about the postal inspector and the murderers tampering with the scene of the crime, but the police chief said nothing. Tom Wine had this information, and he said nothing. They all had access to the video. Daniel Cameron, by the way, notice he ain't said anything about the video showing Hankinson and Cosgrove going through the crime scene, violating the law and police department policy. Notice that Daniel Cameron, he didn't bring that up either. So he doesn't know anything about the fraudulent affidavit for the warrant. He doesn't know anything about the ballistics report that proves that Kenneth Walker did not fire the shot that hit the cops. The cops shot each other. He didn't say anything and doesn't know anything about the video showing Hankinson and Cosgrove contaminating the crime scene after the murder. Daniel Cameron, he doesn't know anything about anything. No evidence looked at whatsoever. And you know who else didn't look at it? The white media didn't look at it. That lets you know these guys are all in cahoots with each other. No, this was supposed to be the perfect crime. Because the best part about it would be everybody would know what the truth was, but they were counting that people weren't going to keep pushing. They were counting that people were going to stay quiet. Well, the grand jurors, we're going to go ahead and blame it on them and let them take the heat. We'll blame it on them and say, well, the reason there was no indictment was it's a grand jury. They weighed the evidence and, well, they just found there was nothing there. Now the grand jury's breaking bad on them and saying, hold on, the attorney general never presented us with the option to indict. And now what's he saying? Well, I didn't feel that this incident rose to that level. I didn't feel that there was enough for me to recommend that. The grand jury seemed to think that there was. See, they don't want this to go any farther because the farther it goes on, under these circumstances, some of these bastards who engage in the cover-up are going to have to go down for that. And that's the problem that they're having. You cannot make it where the administrators of white supremacy go down for practicing and protecting white supremacy. They cannot be punished for it. Because how do you stop all of these killings of black people? How do you stop white supremacy? You punish it, and you punish it hard. So priority one is there's going to be blanket immunity. There's going to be blanket qualified immunity for everyone who covers for and runs interference for and helps to promote the thugs with badges killings of black people. If you help them protect it and you cover for them and you make sure they don't get in trouble, everyone's going to be protected. But what happens when the public makes it clear, nah, someone's going to have to go down for this? The most likely candidate is going to be the useful idiot Daniel Cameron. He's most likely, if anyone is going to be put in prison, and if the black media has its way, some of these bastards are going to be doing time in a cage. Most likely the scapegoat is going to be Daniel Cameron. After all, as I've always told you, when white supremacy is done with its tools, they always break their tools. And Daniel Cameron, you better believe he'll be the one going down for it, because notice how they're not saying anything. The white media is not making a big deal out of Thomas Wine, even though Thomas Wine is who the conspiracy to cover up this murder began with. He was the one who began this whole thing. I told you about the crimes that he committed. Suborning perjury, malicious prosecution, malfeasance. Thomas Wine's head ought to be on the chopping block too, right beside Daniel Cameron's. But they're looking and going, nah, it's the Negro who's going to go down for this one. Oh, the public's outraged? Yeah, Daniel Cameron, you sure are in a tight spot. And Daniel Cameron's on Twitter sounding too pathetic, trying to cover for himself. He's trying to make it seem like, well, I want everyone to know we did our due diligence and we went with the evidence in hands. Like, dude, nobody's believing you. Nobody's believing you. People are pushing for him to be punished. But we must also make it clear, Daniel Cameron's not the only one who is supposed to be punished for this because he did not act alone. And yeah, the white guys who the white media is trying to cover for, they think they're getting away with something. They've gotten away with nothing. But that depends on how hard the public pushes. Now, I know a lot of you are going to be saying, well, gee, the family of Breonna Taylor, they're laying low. They got their little check. They got caked off. And as far as they're concerned, they're going to go through the motions of, oh, what an injustice, we need justice, without ever saying what justice is. That's how you know the fix is in. If they sit there and use the empty word justice without ever qualifying what constitutes justice, that's how you know the fix is in. Don't put too much pressure on them. That's what I noticed about George Floyd's brothers. Or rather, one of his brothers anyway. They would keep saying justice, but never actually say what justice is supposed to be. They're not calling for punishment. That's how you know they've already been talked to and their noses are wide open on it. You cannot be out there advocating for punishment, because with the public looking at you with all eyes on you, you can't be saying anything less than life in a cage is not justice. You can't be telling the public that, because the public's going to look and say, that's right, life in a cage. You can't be doing that. So instead, Mushmouth Crump and Sleaze Merritt and the rest of these black ambulance chasers, they'll come along and say, well, this about the money now. You want to hurt these guys, you need to hurt them in the money. Okay, so we're going to be getting the money from the officers' retirement fund, right? We're going to be going after their pensions, right? The police department's union, the police union's pension fund, we're going after that, right? Well, it's going to be coming from the taxpayers, but you know, that's just the way it is. Look, this going to send a message now. You want to hurt these guys, you hurt them in the wallets now. That's how you, there's a lot more at stake here than you're seeing. Got to hurt them in the wallet. That's what they going to notice. And the politicians going to notice it too. And the family instead is looking and going, well, you know what? Hey, Breonna Taylor's dead. Ain't nothing we can do about it. And truth be told, you know, she wasn't doing anything for us. It's that freaking single mammy syndrome. You know, you got these single mothers who, as far as they're concerned, well, the only thing you ever did in my house was eat, sleep, and take a crap. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, you didn't put nothing on the rent and probably weren't putting nothing on it. You know, I need to get caked off. And that's where that attitude comes from. But not just a single mammy. If you look at the family of Eric Garner's widow was saying that he was kind of dumb. And we all know about Sabrina Fulton. She had no problem glossing over the murder of her own son. So for a lot of black folks here, this is the reason why you don't see me going overboard with saying, oh, what about the families? We have to support the families. The families need to support punishing the police. That's what needs to happen here. Yeah, the white media and the cops, they know when they're dealing with somebody who's ripe for a fall. They know when they're dealing with somebody who's looking to get bought off. When they're dealing with somebody who's just waiting for an offer to be made. They know. See, you notice how they don't talk about Tatiana Jefferson's father. He said, I don't want no hug and I ain't looking for no payoff. White media looked and said, uh-oh, that's not the kind of guy we want to put in front of the camera. That's not the narrative we're trying to push. Let's go talk to Tatiana Jefferson's other relatives. Ooh, they're looking for a payoff. Suckers. So family, we're going to keep beating the drum about this one. We're going to make sure that people understand. Look at what happened here. We're going to make sure that people understand that what happened to Breonna Taylor was not some anomaly. This is what's been happening in all of these cases. Now what happened with the murder of Michael Brown becomes a lot more clear. It becomes a lot more undeniable because everybody's looking and going, this seems exactly like what happened down in Ferguson with Darren Wilson. Yeah, buried it in the grand jury. Oh, is this what happened with Daniel Pantaleo? And Dan Donovan in New York claiming the same thing about the Daniel Pantaleo grand jury. Oh, well, it was the grand jury, you see. Now, in the black media, we've been telling you about this for years and years. If you've been listening to the white media, well, then you're the last one to know. But if you listen to the black media, we've been telling you about this, that these guys have been rigging these grand juries. The grand jury's job is to determine whether or not a crime was committed. And all you have to do is just prove that the event happened. The grand jury's job is not to convict or to determine whether or not the accused did it. Their job is just to determine whether or not a crime was committed. And that's the reason why you got the old legal saying that a prosecutor can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich. And the reason why is he doesn't have to prove that the defendant did it. He only has to prove that the event actually happened. That's the reason why grand juries coming back with indictments is guaranteed if the prosecutor wants it to be. But on the other hand, if he goes in there and says, hey, these grand jury proceedings are secret, and you better believe I will prosecute you. I'll prosecute you for violating that secrecy. So you can't tell anybody what's happening in here. And the grand jury's like, okay, so we're here to weigh whether or not a murder occurred, right? Well, we're not. That's not part of the bill of indictment. Well, what is it going to be? Is it going to be homicide instead of murder? Well, that's not going to be part of the bill either. Well, is it going to be assault? Nope, that's not part of the bill either. Well, what's on the bill? We figured that wanton endangerment. We figured that we figured that did. Well, how do you figure that? You got a ton of other crimes here. Well, that's the one that we want because we figure it makes the right statement about killing a black person in America. We feel it makes the right political statement. It's very interesting that you have that grand juror who broke their silence and is now saying that all the grand jurors should be allowed to speak. See, these are real shockwaves being sent through the system, and it matters that it's happening in the United States. Not just because the U.S. sets the tone for the world, but also because if it can happen here in the heart of the evil empire, that means it can happen anywhere. Global white supremacy uses the United States as the main barometer of whether or not it's still in control. And when you got folks saying, nah, this system here that's protecting the white supremacists and insulating them from punishment, we're going to make sure that none of those things happen. The thugs in blue, we're defunding them. We're going to get rid of them. And the secrecy of the grand jury, your little procedural insulation that you use to try to protect the killers by saying, oh, we got this secret procedure that you can't see, but take our word for it. Everything was above board. Nah, either you're going to release what happened or we're just going to blab about it. White supremacy requires a conspiracy of silence so that it can maintain the fraud that it's not actually breaking the laws, even though the laws are its own. It needs that silence. Now look what's happened to Daniel Cameron. Daniel Cameron lied. He's been caught in his lie, and now he's begging the judge, please give me some more time so that I can go over the 20 hours of the grand jury recordings so I can go ahead and remove and excise and edit out everything that incriminates me. This bastard is the reason that the grand jury's recordings are being made public because of his malfeasance and his illegality and Daniel Cameron's criminality. He's the reason why. Basically, this is a precursor to an investigation of him, and he knows it. How the hell is he being allowed to be the main one who's going over those recordings? You know damn well that he's altering and snipping out and removing anything that incriminates him. You know that. And the judge knows it as well. This is a situation that calls for a special prosecutor. But of course, you bring in a special prosecutor, first thing people are going to be saying is, your billet is going to be to go after the police and Daniel Cameron, the three killers who carried out the murder, and the criminal calling himself the Attorney General of Kentucky who tried to cover it up. The longer this goes on, the worse it gets for them. The public's making it clear. There's no amount of right-wing spin you're going to put on this one. You're not going to get the public to settle for less than the thugs with badges being punished and everyone who tries to cover for them getting punished as well. It just gets worse and worse for them. And they're thinking to themselves they're going to get away with something, but everyone who they need to remain silent won't remain silent. The evidence that they need to have hidden can't stay hidden. People are asking the tough questions and they're getting answers. But understand, this is not an isolated incident. Always make sure that whenever you bring up the cover-up here with the grand jury, you make sure you link it to these other murders of black people so that people understand this is a typical tactic of prosecutors across the country. Doesn't matter if it's in New York or in Ferguson or in Louisville, Kentucky. Whenever the prosecutor says, we got to go to the grand jury. Okay, we know what that means. That means they're going to be doing what Daniel Cameron did. They're going to be telling the grand jury, there's not going to be any murder as part of your option. But also what needs to be told to people is, and we can thank Daniel Cameron for opening his big mouth. He said, well, they could have asked for an indictment for murder if they could have suggested that. Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because now what's going to happen is we make sure people understand. If they try to use the grand jury dodge in the future, the grand jury can recommend first-degree murder. The grand jury can say, we decided the prosecutor didn't want to recommend murder, so we went ahead and wrote it in ourselves. This is about making sure we take control of this system, but it don't take control of anything unless you speak up. The bad guys get to run the boards because the white media is going to push their lies. It's up to us to push the truth. But as far as secrecy of the grand jury goes, that is also one of those things that has to go. If a trial jury can be open to the public, then you know damn well the grand jury ought to be. It must be. There is nothing sacred going on in the grand jury. But the reason for the secrecy is just occasionally when the prosecutor decides that he's got to protect the powerful, he's got to protect the influential, he's got to protect white supremacy's henchmen and hitmen, well, the grand jury's secrecy makes it where he can do it without having to pay a political price. And, well, he just tells the public, well, you see, it's just the law, you see. The grand jury is secret, you see. And, well, we can't tell you what happened, but take our word for it. It was nothing illegal. Yeah, the public is taking control of the situation. The bad guys are scrambling for cover. And you know what you call that? You call that justice.